I came to Millbrook, Vermont, to escape the noise of my own mistakes. The job posting was simple enough. Restore a Victorian mansion, good pay, room and board included. What it didn't mention was Arthur Castellane, standing in the doorway like a question mark made of shadows and expensive wool. "You're the contractor," he said, not a question. His voice carried the weight of old money and older grief. "Caspian Fletcher." I extended my hand, dusty from the 3-hour drive. He looked at it like I was offering him broken glass, then shook it briefly. His fingers were long, pale, unmarked by honest work. "Before I continue with the rest of the story, kindly do me a little favor. Please hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to comment your favorite part of the story below. I love reading your thoughts and reactions. They truly keep me going. Now allow me to take a moment to appreciate you. Yes, you. Thank you for making us a strong community. Each one of you is a pillar of strength, color, and courage. This journey wouldn't be possible without your love, your voice, and your presence. You are making the queer community proud, and I see every one of you. Your support is not just a number. It's a movement. It's light in the dark. It's love, loud and unashamed. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for standing with me. Thank you for being you. Now back to the story. The house loomed behind him, queen in style, probably 1890s, all gingerbread trim and judgment. Paint peeled like old skin. The wraparound porch sagged under the weight of neglect. "My grandmother's," Arthur said, following my gaze. "She died last spring. Left me this." He gestured at the mansion like it was a burden, not a gift. I shouldered my tool bag. "What exactly needs fixing?" Something flickered across his face. Too quick to catch, too real to ignore. "Everything." The front door opened to reveal carved mahogany and shattered dreams. Water damage bloomed across the ceiling like dark flowers. The hardwood floors bore scars from decades of living. But underneath the damage, I could see the bones of something beautiful. "The foundation's solid," I said, running my hand along the banister. "Good bones. She just needs someone to care about her again." When I looked up, Arthur was watching me with an expression I couldn't name, like he was memorizing something he was afraid to lose. "The carriage house is yours," he said quietly. "I'll leave you to it." He disappeared up the grand staircase, all sharp angles and beautiful damage. I stood alone in the foyer, surrounded by the ghosts of someone else's memories, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Arthur watched me work. Not obviously, he was too well-bred for that. But I felt his eyes through the tall windows as I stripped the porch of rotted wood. Glimpsed him in doorways when I thought I was alone. He moved through the house like smoke, there and gone before I could pin him down. "You don't have to hide," I called out one morning, balanced on a ladder, scraping paint from the second-story trim. "It's your house." Silence. Then, after a moment that stretched like taffy, "I'm not hiding." I looked down. He stood on the front lawn, coffee mug cradled in both hands, wearing a cable-knit sweater that probably cost more than my truck. The morning light caught the gold in his brown hair. Could have fooled me. I went back to scraping. "You're quieter than a church mouse. I don't want to disturb your work." "You're not." I paused, looked down again. "Unless you want to be." Something shifted in his expression. He took a step closer to the ladder. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's lonely work, fixing things. Company wouldn't hurt." He considered this like I'd proposed something radical. Maybe, for him, I wouldn't know what to do, he said finally. "You could start by telling me about her. Your grandmother." His face went soft and fragile as old paper. "Theodora. Everyone called her Thea. She was formidable. Must have been to build something like this. She didn't build it. She saved it." Arthur set his coffee on the porch steps, sat down beside it. "Bought it in 1962 when the town wanted to tear it down. Spent 40 years bringing it back to life." I climbed down from the ladder, sat on the step below him, close enough to smell his cologne. Something expensive and understated. "Sounds like you loved her." "She was the only one who ever." He stopped, shook his head. She was special. What would she think of you fixing her up? Arthur's laugh was sharp as winter wind. She'd probably say I should have done it years ago, that I let fear keep me from doing what needed doing. I studied his profile, the straight nose, the stubborn jaw, the way his eyes held secrets like deep water. Fear of what? He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt something shift between us, like a door opening in a house I'd thought was empty. Of caring too much, he said quietly. Of losing what matters. I wanted to tell him that some things were worth the risk. Instead, I picked up my scraper and got back to work, feeling his eyes on me like sunlight through glass. We fell into a rhythm. Arthur would appear with coffee when I started work, disappear when the afternoon stretched long. We talked about safe things, the house's history, the town's gossip, books we'd both read. He was educated in that particular way of old money families, spoke 3 languages, could discuss art and literature with the casual fluency of someone who'd never doubted his right to culture. I told him about my life in rougher strokes. Growing up in Portland, learning carpentry from my father, the girlfriend who'd left me for someone more stable. The usual debris of a 32-year-old life. Why Vermont? He asked one afternoon, watching me restore the intricate spindle work on the front porch. Needed somewhere quiet. I fitted a new piece of wood into place, tested its stability. Sometimes you have to go backward before you can go forward. Is that what you're doing? Going backward. I looked at him, sprawled in a wicker chair that had probably been Thea's, reading a book of poetry. He'd changed since I arrived, traded his expensive sweaters for worn jeans and soft cotton shirts. His hair had grown longer, curled at the nape of his neck. He looked younger, less armored. Maybe, I said. What about you? I inherited this place because I was the only one left who remembered her stories. My cousins wanted to sell it, split the money. He closed the book, marked his place with a finger. But she left it to me, said I was the only one who understood what it meant to be broken and beautiful at the same time. The honesty of it hit me square in the chest. Are you? Broken and beautiful? He smiled, and it was nothing like the careful expressions he'd worn those first days. The smile was real, unguarded, devastating. I guess we'll find out. That night I couldn't sleep. Lay in the narrow bed in the carriage house, listening to the old building settle around me, thinking about Arthur's smile and the way he'd looked at me when he said it, like he was hoping I might see something in him worth fixing. I'd come to Millbrook to escape complications. Instead, I was falling for a man who wore loneliness like a second skin, who moved through his grandmother's house like he was afraid of disturbing ghosts. Maybe that made me an idiot, but as I finally drifted off to sleep, I could admit to myself what I'd been fighting for weeks. I wanted to be the one to help him believe he was worth saving. Then an accident happened on a Tuesday. I was replacing rotten boards on the back deck when my foot went through what looked like solid wood. The fall wasn't far, but I landed wrong, felt something pop in my ankle that shouldn't pop. Arthur found me 20 minutes later, sitting on the ground with my boot off, testing the damage. Jesus, he breathed, dropping to his knees beside me. What happened? Deck gave way. I'm fine, just twisted it. But when I tried to stand, the world went white around the edges. Arthur caught me before I could fall, his arms strong and sure around my waist. You're not fine, he said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Fear. Real fear. We need to get you to a doctor. It's just a sprain. Caspian. The way he said my name, like a prayer, like an accusation, made me look at him. His face was inches from mine, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes, could count the faint freckles across his nose. Let me take care of you. The ride to the urgent care clinic was quiet except for the radio playing soft jazz and the sound of Arthur's fingers tapping nervous rhythms on the steering wheel. I watched his profile, the way his jaw tightened every time I shifted in my seat. You don't have to worry, I said finally. I'm tougher than I look. That's what I'm afraid of. What do you mean? He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I mean you're the kind of person who takes care of everyone else. Who do you let take care of you? The question hit deeper than it should have. I don't know. Never really thought about it. Maybe you should. At the clinic, Arthur paced the waiting room like a caged animal while they x-rayed my ankle. Not broken, but a bad sprain. 2 weeks off my feet, they said. Crutches and ice and patience. 2 weeks, Arthur repeated as we drove home. That puts you behind schedule. It's fine. I'll figure it out. No. His voice was firm. You'll rest. The house has waited 50 years for repairs. Can wait 2 more weeks. That night, he appeared at the carriage house with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. You don't have to, I started. I know. He set the bags on my small table, found plates in the cabinet like he belonged there. I want to. We ate by candlelight. Not because it was romantic, but because one of the carriage house lamps had blown and neither of us bothered to fix it. The wine made everything softer, warmer. Arthur told me about his grandmother's travels, how she'd collected stories and artifacts from around the world. I told him about the houses I'd restored, the satisfaction of bringing something beautiful back to life. You're good at that, he said, refilling my glass. Seeing potential in broken things. Is that what you think you are? Broken. He was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in his glass. I think I'm afraid to find out. I reached across the table, covered his hand with mine. His skin was warm, soft, unmarked by the kind of work that leaves scars. You're not broken, Arthur. You're just careful. He turned his hand palm up, let our fingers interweave. Maybe too careful. Maybe. We sat like that until the candles burned low, our hands linked across the table, the weight of possibility settling around us like snow. When he finally left, he squeezed my fingers once, soft and sure. Rest, he said. I'll check on you tomorrow. I watched him cross the yard to the main house, a figure moving through darkness toward light. Only when his bedroom window glowed warm did I realize I was already lost. Recovery meant Arthur taking care of me, and Arthur taking care of me meant discovering sides of him I'd never imagined. He cooked simple things but with an attention to detail that spoke of genuine care. He read to me in the afternoons when the pain made me restless, his voice turning poetry into music. He helped me shower the first few days, his touch clinical and gentle, though I caught him looking sometimes when he thought I wasn't watching. You don't have to do this, I said one morning as he helped me navigate the carriage house steps. I know. He adjusted his grip on my arm, steadied me. But I like taking care of you. The honesty of it stopped me cold. Arthur, I know what this looks like, he said quickly. I know you probably think I'm some lonely rich boy playing house with the contractor. But it's not that. You make me feel. Feel what? He was quiet so long I thought he'd changed his mind. Then, necessary. Like maybe I'm good for something besides writing checks and looking decorative at charity functions. I turned to face him fully, balanced on my crutches, and saw something raw and real in his expression. You are good for something. You're good for a lot of things. Name one. You make the best coffee I've ever had. You remember everything I tell you, even the stupid stuff. You laugh at my terrible jokes. You see beauty in things other people would throw away. I paused, let the weight of what I was about to say settle. You make me want to stay somewhere for the first time in years. Something shifted in his face. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, could smell that expensive cologne mixed with something purely him. Caspian, he said, my name soft as a confession. Yeah, I think I'm falling for you. The words hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure we were ready to cross. But looking at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the careful hope in the set of his shoulders, I knew I was already halfway across. Good, I said finally, because I'm already gone. He kissed me then, soft and tentative, like he was afraid I might break. I dropped one crutch, used my free hand to pull him closer, to show him he didn't have to be gentle with me. Not about this. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. This is probably a mistake, he whispered. Probably. I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone. Neither do I. Not like this. I brushed my thumb across his cheekbone. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can figure it out together. He smiled then, that real smile that transformed his whole face. I'd like that. That night he stayed. Not for anything physical. My ankle was still a mess and the carriage house bed barely fit one person. But we talked until dawn, sharing stories and secrets, learning the geography of each other's hearts. And when I finally fell asleep, it was with Arthur's hand in mine and the sound of his breathing like a lullaby. For the first time in months, I dreamed of staying instead of leaving. When I could finally walk without crutches, Arthur and I fell into a new rhythm. He worked alongside me now, learning to handle tools with the same careful precision he brought to everything else. His hands were soft at first, but work hardened them, left them marked with honest calluses that made him smile with surprising pride. Thea would have loved this, he said one afternoon, watching me teach him to properly sand a windowsill. She always said the house needed someone who understood craftsmanship. What about you? Do you understand it? He paused, considered the question seriously. I'm learning. You're a good teacher. You're a good student. We were working on the front parlor, stripping decades of paint from the original crown molding. Tedious work that required patience and care. Exactly Arthur's kind of task. He approached each section like he was performing surgery, meticulous and focused. Can I ask you something? I said, taking a break to watch him work. Always. Why didn't you ever fix this place yourself? You've had it for months. His hands stilled on the sandpaper. I was afraid I'd ruin it, that I'd try to fix something and make it worse instead. He looked at me, eyes serious. I'm not good at fixing things, Caspian. I'm better at breaking them. That's not true, isn't it? Every relationship I've ever had, I've found a way to sabotage. Every chance I've been given, I've thrown away because I was scared of not being enough. He set down his tools, sat back on his heels. I wanted to hire someone else to fix Thea's house because I was terrified I'd disappoint her one more time. The pain in his voice was real, deep. I moved closer, sat beside him on the dusty floor. Tell me about them. The relationships you think you broke. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, college boyfriend, Marcus. Pre-law, serious, everything my parents wanted for me. I loved him or thought I did. But every time things got real, got serious, I'd pick fights. Find reasons to push him away. Eventually, he got tired of it. What were you afraid of? That he'd realize I wasn't worth the effort. That I was just another pretty rich boy with nothing interesting underneath. Arthur's laugh was bitter. Turned out I was right. He married someone else 6 months after we broke up. Someone with substance. I reached for his hand, still dirty with sawdust and sweat. You have substance, Arthur. You're one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, caring people I've ever met. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you well enough to know you're wrong. I squeezed his fingers. I know you remember how I take my coffee. I know you read poetry because it makes you feel less alone. I know you inherited your grandmother's house because she saw something special in you, and she wasn't wrong. He looked at our joined hands. What if I disappoint you too? What if you don't? Caspian, I'm not Marcus. I'm not your parents or your cousins or anyone else who made you feel like you weren't enough. I'm just a guy who thinks you're pretty amazing, even when you don't see it yourself. He kissed me then, sudden and fierce, like he was trying to believe what I'd said through touch alone. I kissed him back, tasting hope and fear and something that might have been love. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I want to try, he whispered. With you, I want to try being brave. We don't have to be brave all at once, I said. We can start small, build something strong. He smiled, and it was different from any smile I'd seen from him before. This one was pure possibility. Like the house, he said. Like the house. We made love on a Tuesday night in October, when the Vermont hills were burning red and gold and the first frost had kissed the windows of the carriage house. It wasn't planned, nothing about us had been planned. Arthur came to check on some electrical work I'd been doing. Found me reading in bed with a glass of wine and paint still under my fingernails. You look comfortable, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Room for two, if you're interested. He was interested. Had been for weeks, I thought, in the way his eyes lingered on my mouth when I talked, in the careful space he left between us that felt more charged than any touch. Caspian, he said, my name a question. I'm sure, I said, and he crossed the room like he was coming home. We undressed each other slowly, mapping skin and scars, learning the weight and warmth of each other. Arthur's body was beautiful in the way of someone who'd been blessed with good genetics and the luxury of caring for himself. Lean and pale and unmarked except for a small scar on his shoulder from childhood surgery. You're shaking? I whispered against his throat. I'm nervous. Why? He pulled back to look at me, eyes dark and serious. Because this matters. You matter. I kissed him then, deep and sure, trying to show him without words that he mattered too. That this space between us had become precious, worth protecting. We moved together like we were learning a new language, all whispered names and gentle guidance. Arthur touched me like I was something rare, something that might disappear if he wasn't careful. I touched him like he was exactly what I'd been searching for without knowing it. Afterward, we lay tangled in sheets that smelled like sawdust and possibility. Arthur's head on my chest, my fingers in his hair. Stay, I said into the darkness. I'm not going anywhere. But even as he said it, I felt him holding something back. Some part of himself he wasn't ready to give. I told myself it was normal, that trust took time to build properly. That love, because that's what this was. I could admit it now. Love required patience. I fell asleep believing we had all the time in the world. The first sign of trouble came in November, when the restoration was nearly finished. Arthur grew distant, distracted, disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. When I asked where he'd been, he'd give vague answers about errands in town, calls with his lawyer, family business that needed attention. Everything okay? I asked one morning, finding him staring out the kitchen window with his coffee growing cold in his hands. Fine, he said, but he didn't look at me. Just thinking. About what? The house is almost done. It was true. The mansion gleamed with fresh paint, its windows clear and whole, its bones strong and sure. We'd saved something beautiful, brought it back to life through careful work and honest sweat. I was proud of what we'd accomplished together. She's going to be gorgeous, I said, moving to stand behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist. Thea would be so proud. Arthur tensed in my arms. What happens when it's finished? What do you mean? I mean, what happens to us? You came here to do a job. The job's almost done. I turned him to face me, searched his expression for clues to what was happening behind his careful mask. I came here to do a job, yeah. But that's not why I'm staying. Isn't it? Arthur, what's going on? Talk to me. He pulled away, moved to the other side of the kitchen like he needed distance. I got a call yesterday from the Historical Society. They want to feature the house in their annual tour. It would mean publicity, recognition. Good for property values. That's wonderful. You should be proud. They want to interview the contractor too. The man who brought Thea Castellane's house back to life. His smile was sharp, brittle. Imagine their surprise when they find out it's some nobody from Portland who doesn't even have a permanent address. The words hit like a slap. Is that what you think I am? Some nobody? I think you're exactly what you've always been. A drifter who fixes things and moves on. And I think I've been fooling myself, believing this was anything more than a job to you. I stared at him, this man I'd fallen in love with, watching him build walls in real time. That's not fair. That's not fair, and you know it. Don't I? He straightened, became the cold, distant man I'd first met. You've never said you were staying permanently. Never even discussed it. For all I know, you've got another job lined up already. I don't. But you could. Tomorrow, next week, next month. You could get a call and disappear. And I'd be left here with a beautiful house and the memory of someone who was just passing through. Understanding hit like ice water. This isn't about the job. This is about you being scared. Maybe I am scared. Maybe I've learned that it's better to end things cleanly than wait for them to fall apart. So you're ending us. He didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. I stood there in Thea's kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of everything we'd built together, and felt the ground give way beneath my feet. Not the physical collapse of rotten wood, but something deeper, more fundamental. Fine, I said finally. If that's what you want. It's not about what I want, isn't it? I threw his words back at him. Because it seems to me you're doing exactly what you always do. Finding a reason to push away anyone who gets too close. I left him standing in the kitchen and went to pack my tools. The house was finished. There was nothing left for me to fix. I should have left that day. Should have loaded my truck and driven back to Portland without looking back. Instead, I spent 3 more days finishing the last details. Touching up paint, adjusting doors, replacing a loose floorboard in the front hall. Arthur stayed out of my way, disappeared early each morning and returned late each night. We moved around each other like ghosts, careful not to touch, not to acknowledge what we were losing. On my last morning, I found an envelope on the carriage house table. My final payment plus a bonus that was more than generous. The note was brief, written in Arthur's careful handwriting. Thank you for everything. The house is beautiful. TC would have loved what you've done. No mention of us. No acknowledgement of what had grown between these walls. I was loading the last of my tools when Arthur appeared on the front porch. He looked awful, pale, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. Caspian. I stopped, my hand on the truck door. Yeah. He started, stopped, shook his head. Drive safe. I waited, hoping he'd say something else. Anything else. When he didn't, I got in my truck and drove away from the most beautiful house I'd ever restored, and the most beautiful man I'd ever loved. I made it to the town limits before I had to pull over. Sat on the side of the road with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, finally understanding what Arthur had meant about being broken and beautiful. Some things could be restored. Others could only be survived. 6 months later, I was working on a farmhouse in New Hampshire when I got the call. Arthur's number on my phone. A number I'd never deleted but never called. Caspian. His voice was different. Smaller. Arthur. What's wrong? Could you come back? To Millbrook? There's been some damage. Storm damage. The house needs. He was crying. Arthur Castellane, who never let his guard down, was crying into the phone. I'm on my way, I said. I drove through the night, my heart hammering against my ribs. Not sure what I'd find, but knowing I had to go. Because some things are worth saving, even when they seem impossible to fix. Some foundations are strong enough to rebuild on, even when the first structure falls apart. The house still stood when I arrived at dawn, but Arthur had been right about the damage. A massive oak had come down in the storm, taken out part of the roof and one of the second-story windows. Water damage, broken glass. All the careful work we'd done threatened by one night of violent weather. I found Arthur sitting on the front steps in yesterday's clothes, staring at the damage with hollow eyes. I couldn't call anyone else, he said without looking at me. I tried, but every time I picked up the phone, all I could think was that no one else would understand. No one else would know how to fix her the right way. I sat beside him on the steps, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, careful not to touch. It's not as bad as it looks. Most of the structure is sound. We can fix this. Can we? He finally looked at me, and I saw everything in his eyes. Grief, hope, love, fear. Can we fix us too? I thought about the last 6 months. The jobs I'd taken to keep busy. The nights I'd lain awake thinking about coffee made perfectly and poetry read aloud, and the way Arthur's face had looked in candlelight. The way he'd touched me like I was precious. The way he'd loved me like I was worth staying for, until his fear convinced him I wasn't. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'd like to try. Arthur's smile was watery, fragile, real. I missed you. I missed you so much I thought I might die from it. I missed you too. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about us. I was so afraid of you leaving that I made you leave. And then I spent 6 months learning what it actually felt like to lose you. I reached for his hand, found it cold and shaking. I'm here now. Are you staying? I looked at the house. Our house, because that's what it had become. Damaged but not destroyed, still beautiful, still worth saving. Like us, maybe. I'm staying, I said. If you want me to. I want you to. He squeezed my fingers. I want you to stay forever. Forever's a long time. Not long enough. I kissed him then, soft and careful, tasting salt and hope and the promise of second chances. When we broke apart, Arthur rested his forehead against mine. I love you, he whispered. I should have said it before. I should have said it every day. I love you too. Even after I was an idiot? Especially after you were an idiot. I smiled, felt something broken inside me start to heal. Lucky for you, I'm good at fixing things. And lucky for me, I'm finally ready to be fixed. We sat on those front steps until the sun was fully up, holding hands and making plans. The house would need work, but that was okay. The best things always needed work. Love needed work too, daily, careful, patient work. But looking at Arthur, seeing the hope in his eyes, feeling the solid weight of his hand in mine, I knew we were both finally ready to do the work. Some foundations are strong enough to build on twice. Some love stories are worth telling again. Better this time, with more honesty and less fear. The house stood damaged but not destroyed. So did we. And that, I thought as Arthur leaned against my shoulder and started planning our repairs, was more than enough to build a life on.